on titles and graphics. Well, we have a new way to create titles using now in the toolbar there is the titler tool right here that you have it's the type tool actually that you can click and hold on and you can type uh, horizontally normal or vertically. You can also go up to graphics and choose let's see, wait, you have to highlight your activate your timeline or your sequence, your timeline, and then you can go to graphics, new layer, and choose text or choose rectangle or ellipse if you want to create titles. But I want to start with the legacy titler, the titler that we used to have, and then I'll give you an overview on the new titler that's replacing the legacy. Well, we still have the legacy. There are some pros and there's still some definite legitimate reasons why you would still want to use the legacy title. Now to get to the legacy titler, you would go file new and then you choose legacy title, and there's still some options in there that you don't have with the new titler, so we'll compare them. So legacy, well, but before we do that, let's go into our sequences in our project panel and open up your sequences. And scroll down and find that lightning time code and highlight that. Is everyone there? Right click it and choose duplicate. So you have a duplicate. I'm stretching this out here.
On the lighting time code?
Yeah, so we have 2 now. Do you have 2? You can stretch this column over to see what. It automatically renamed it copy 01, but we can change the name to let's just call it disk thrower. Is that how you spell disk thrower? And we're gonna make him, instead of shooting lightning, let's make something that looks like he's throwing a disc, and we'll do that with graphics using the titler. So if you double click now on disc thrower, does everyone have disc thrower? Then it comes to the front of your sequences in your timeline. You can just X out close the other one, so we just have disc thrower up. And instead of lightning, we're gonna put a disc here. So we can, where do we have our lightning? We have our lightning on our video 2 track, right? If I click the eyeball off and on, you'll see that the lightning is in this adjustment layer. So all we have to do is select that adjustment layer and press delete, and we can put a graphic there instead, and then animate the graphic so that it looks like he's throwing it. So let's do that. Let's make a graphic, not with our titler. Now, see, these are not with our new titler. See, these are where you go for the new titling. Or also, if you click and hold on the pen tool, you'll see that you can draw graphics freeform with the pen tool, if you know the pen tool. And the rectangle tool and the ellipse tool are there. So you could make graphics with those. But there are not as many options using the new features, the new tools here, but they're pretty cool. We'll compare them. But here is where we go if we want the legacy titler, which still has some more options that the new titler doesn't have. So we're gonna go file new and choose legacy title, and then we can name this disk, because we're just gonna make it a disk out of it. It's gonna be in a window, a frame that fits the size of the sequence with the same time-based frame rate, and pixel dimension, pixel aspect ratio, and we'll say okay there. So it opens up the legacy titler.
Did we give it a name?
Yeah, I just named it disk.
Oh,
So now it's open here in the titler. So there's a floating window in front of Premiere, normal interface, and we have on the left column we've got a bunch of tools. We've got a move tool, a rotate tool. We got the two titler tools here. We've got a area type tool. See, we don't have that in the regular toolbar. And we've got type on a path if you want to type along a curve. We didn't have that in the regular the new titler. And we have all the pen tool options here, and we have a bunch of different shapes that we could draw, and a line tool, and cool stuff like that. We've got alignment buttons here, center, distribute the objects if you want to make a whole layout of objects. Up at the top, we've got some quick controls that we would have access to here. We can use this. This is a cool feature. The new title based on current title lets you duplicate titles with the same attributes, so you can make like many titles that match each other. And then this one here is really helpful. Let's see if I mouse over it. Is it gonna say what it is? I hate that one. That it doesn't tell you its name. But oh, is it telling me yet? No. Come on, wake up. Maybe not. Okay, so if I click on this, it will, these are the roll crawl options. So this is also a feature that you won't have with the new titler. You'll have to animate things if you want to have the first what's selected is still, so it's just a still title. But you know those rolling credits at the end of movies, if you want that to happen, this is a nice feature to be able to choose roll. Or if you want to do the little tickers, like the news tickers where the little, stock market info crawls across the screen, you have the crawling options to have your text crawl across the screen. You don't have that with the new titler that's looks like it's trying to replace our legacy titler. You have these nice features here, and then timing that you can set on the rolling and the crawling, so that you don't have to do keyframing for everything. This will just automatically animate and move your titles, which is cool, right? But I'm gonna keep it on still because we're gonna keyframe our graphic. I'm gonna cancel out of that. There's a tab ruler here. There's also this button here that lets you, if you don't want to see the background of the video where you're at, see, wherever I'm at, like if I drag my playhead around in the timeline, it's going to change what we're looking at here. And that's helpful if you're making titles that are interacting with the image behind it. It's helpful to know where you're at. Like, I want to get to the point where he flings his hand out, like about there. I can even use my arrow keys to get to that point there. And now I'm there. Now, if you didn't want to see the image, it was distracting, you can always turn that off and just turn off show background video. And now you can just focus on designing your title. But if you want to see that, then it's nice to have. It tells you also you can move the time code by dragging on it to get to a specific point in time in your timeline. So I want right where his hand opens, let's say. Okay, and then all of this section here, the legacy title properties, this is really helpful for just controlling the transformation properties, the appearance of your titles, and the effect. You'll find more effects here than you will if you're using the new title or over here, you have less options, less effects to work with. Like here you have sheen and you can do multiple strokes and just lots more over here with this controller than you will have using these titlers over here. This title, you'll get to control your, if you use this tool here, you'll get to control everything in your effect controls, which is kind of nice. But here you have more options. And then there are also these styles that you can use as a starting point. I would recommend, if you like any of these styles, to use them as a starting point, not usually the first go-to, because that's the lazy way to do it, because these are basically everything that you make decisions on in here. Somebody made those decisions to create these styles. They're nice, some of them are nice styles, but you don't always want to just click a button and that's it. You want to really customize your styles to work with create the feeling, convey the tone for the particular work that you're doing, and not just rely on decisions somebody else made. But it's a nice starting point. Like anyway, let's go ahead and start. So we want to let's make something that he's gonna throw. We're gonna make a graphic. So we can use, what shape do you think will be good to make a disc? Ellipse. Yeah, ellipse is probably good. There's also these like rounded rectangles, but ellipse will probably be the best choice. So we can select that, and then we can draw out our ellipse by clicking and dragging down in a diagonal, and you can make it bigger than what than what will fit in his hand, because we can scale it later when we keyframe, and we'll keyframe in the effect controls panel with the motion properties. But we can design our ellipse larger. So what should we put on our ellipse? So now that we have an object to work with, now our legacy title properties are active and working. So you can change in transform section. You can change here, I'm going to close up everything and go one by one to see what's what. So for example, I'm going to open up transform. What's in transform? Opacity. You can change the opacity of the object. You can position the object using the coordinates here. You can change the width or the height. Of course, you can go with your selection tool here and select the object and do the same thing, and you see the numbers are changing, but you could go right to the object to change the size of the object. So we're just going to eyeball it. You don't have to match my numbers, but the numbers are actually here if you wanted to match my numbers, but you can just eyeball it, make it, roughly this big. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay, there's rotation controls here, or you can mouse over the corner or the outside of the corner of what this is called. What's this called? Anyone know? This structure here. It starts with a B. It's a box. It's called the bounding box. You can use that bounding box to rotate, or if you want to be very precise, you can click on the number and just press 0, press return. Okay, so that's what's in transform. I can close up transform. Now in properties, what's in properties? Oh, in properties you can change the graphic type. So if I change my mind after I drew it, I guess I could switch it to something else, but I'm not going to do that. Distort, you can distort it. Oh, look at that. That's kind of cool. You can distort it along the x-axis. Now it looks like some weird egg thing, Play-Doh thing or something. Or along the y-axis, but I'm going to just make it back to 0 on those, to normal. So that's in properties. Okay, so now it has right here, this section, this is the fill section. Fill is checked on because it has a fill. That's the color inside. What color is it inside? White. We can open up the fill properties and see that we have different fill types you can change it to. You can change it to different gradients. What's a gradient? Anyone know what's a gradient? How do you define what a gradient is?
It changes color or
right, exactly. When you have multiple colors blending into each other, so there's a linear gradient, and then to change the color of the gradient, you can select the color stop and then choose a different color here, or you can simply double click on a color stop and you have a color picker. So maybe I want a yellow, so I can drag my slider up and down to get to the, like maybe a yellow gold, and then drag the circle around. Be careful to avoid when you see exclamation marks, because when you mouse over that, it's saying that the color is not broadcast safe. So if you wanted to be able to show this on television, the color that I'm seeing on my screen isn't necessarily going to be a color that will broadcast safely on television. So you can click on the exclamation mark and the color will adjust to a safe color that will broadcast accurately. So I just added yellow there. Maybe I want to double click and add something else, like an orange. There's also other types of gradients. Radial gradient. There's 4 color gradients where you can actually select 4 different colors in there. Bevel lets you create like a beveled edge. Let's see if I adjust the size of the bevel. Now you can see kind of like where the color is blending on the edge there. You can change the lighting. If you check lit, it looks more like a dramatic change there. Balance, you can play with the balance of the bevel. You can adjust the highlight opacity. So there's just a million controls you can play with if you like all these controls. The light angle you can change where the lighting is coming from. Where see, this is darker now, this is lighter, by changing the light angle. Light magnitude can make it more intense. Then there's sheen you can play with. Sheen, you can check sheen on, and then it gives you this line that's like supposed to be a light line, and then you can change the color of the sheen. You can change the opacity of the sheen. You can change the size so it spreads more, and then maybe bring the opacity down so it looks like a sheen of light. That's the idea there. You can even change the angle of the sheen. Offset to move it up and down. You can even add a texture to your fill color. If you check texture on, then with texture you can click this button here and you can find something with a texture. If you have an image with texture, you can add texture into it. I don't happen to have one offhand. We can play with that later. But then you'll be able to adjust your texture. So I'm just gonna uncheck texture. Unless you guys want to go hunt for a texture and see how that will work. You guys want to do that on Google? Yeah, okay, so let's go into Google and we can go, I'm gonna get a new tab here, and just go to google.com and click images. And then you can type in texture and look at all the textures that come up that you can choose from. Like if you wanted to give your object a certain texture. And some of these are really big. And if you click on one, let's see what happens if you right click and then you choose open image in new tab. Let's see if it gives you the full size. A lot of these aren't going to necessarily give you the full size. Let me see if I go to tools and then I go to usage rights and labeled for reuse with modification. I might have better luck. So let's see if I click on this texture here and I right click it and then I go to open image in new tab. See if it gives me, there, that's more like it. It gives me the full size and then I can right click and save image as, and I'm just gonna call it texture and put it in my documents area in my folder for the class. And generally, if you're working on a project, you should have a special folder, that's designated for that project that holds your media, a media folder for each project. So I would be looking for my media folder to store that texture, like, see, for the promo. See, maybe I'll use this texture in the promo. So I'm just going to put it in promo media, even though I'm going to be actually connecting it to my lesson 13. So I'm going to be a little not so organized by doing this, but you want to put your media together in one place usually. So I'm just going to save this. So this is media, it's an image. Going back into Premiere now, I can check texture on and I can select texture button there, and then I know where I just stored it in promo media and I named it texture and I click open, and now it put this texture on top of my image. And then let's see what we need to do. We need to definitely blend it because the idea is to blend the texture. So I'm going to skip down to blending first and open up blending. And then so with blending, you can mix it in with the other color.
Yeah. How did you get the texture in there?
I clicked right next to, you check texture on, and then right next to where the word texture, there's a button here. You click on that button and then you can choose the texture.
You recording this, Navi?
Yes. Flip with object. Let's see. Not sure what it's doing. Rotate with object. Okay, well, let's just go to blending now. So you can mix it down, so bring down the opacity. You can, let's see. Invert composition. Let's see what, if we click fill key, what does that do? Nothing. Texture key, nothing. Alpha scale, that's just making the whole thing transparent. Composite rule, it's working with the alpha. What's alpha? You guys know what alpha is?
Part of the alphabet.
Alpha refers to what's transparent and what's not transparent. So it's filling what's there, what's not transparent, right? Because it's based on alpha. But I guess if you choose a different thing like red, it's gonna just fill in the red pixels, fill the texture in just, or blue just in the blue, or green in just the green. I'm gonna keep it alpha. You could invert, well, that's not really helping much. Let's see, scaling. Under scaling, we have, let's see, options here. It's on clipped face. Oh, but you can adjust how it's scaling here by choosing these other options. So texture, object X, object Y. Let me just go back to clipped face. And it just changes, like, in horizontal. See what you can do. You can, with horizontal and vertical, you can change kind of how the texture is positioned inside the object, and how things are tiled. So tiling X would be, it's tiling across the x-axis on a horizontal. Tiling Y will be up and down. It's just repeating the image over and over again. But this this texture is big enough that we can't even see the tiling, so that's fine. So mainly in blending, maybe we want to bring down the texture a lot on mix so that we can still see the color underneath, but have a feel of the texture. So you could do that. Or if you don't like the texture at all, you can always uncheck it and go back to the way it was. If you like that look, or if you like, you know, a little texture might make the object look a little more real. So these are the options that are in fill. How are you filling the object? And so there's fill, there's the fill type, there's sheen, you can check on or off, texture, you can check on or off, and then you're designing your object. Let me see. Yeah, so I'm gonna close up fill. Then there's strokes. If you open up strokes, then you can add inner strokes or outer strokes. Those are lines. Those are outlines. So inner stroke, like if I want to add an inner stroke, I can click the add button right there. And then I can give it, so now I have an inner stroke, so I have inner stroke options. So I can choose, what can I choose? The type, it's on the edge, or there's depth, which kind of looks like a shadow, or drop face. That's over the whole thing. I think I'll keep it on edge for now. Edge is the type, and then the size, you can change the size of the stroke. You can change this is now the fill type on the stroke itself. So you could put a gradient, you could go from solid to a gradient on the stroke itself and change the colors by selecting a color stop and clicking the color stop color, and now I have red in my stroke. Or I could select another color stop and click the color stop color, or if you like, double click the color stop and then I can choose another color. So now I have color in my stroke. And you can then change the angle on the color in the stroke. You can, ooh, look at that. You can even click repeat. It's just so many options. Like you can repeat. You can make the colors repeat, and then you have stripes. That's kind of cool, huh?
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird looking disc there. And you can even add sheen to the stroke if you want. The sheen is now, I don't know if you can see very well, but the sheen is now in the stroke, and then you can adjust the size of the sheen in the stroke and the color of the sheen and the angle of the sheen and all that good stuff. The offset, where it is up and down in the stroke. And you can even add texture. So you can do all of that to your strokes. It's kind of crazy, all the options you have. So you have inner strokes, you can do outer strokes, stroke that will be on the outside. You can do many strokes. See, I can add an outer stroke. Now I have a stroke on the outside too. If I change my mind and I don't want that stroke, I can either just uncheck it or I can click delete. I could put a drop shadow, so there I can check drop shadow and add a drop shadow behind my my disc. If you open up your drop shadow options, you'll see what options you have. It's right now it's set to 50%. There's the color, it's black. Set to 50%. I can darken it. Can you see? I don't know if you can see the drop shadow there. Let me change the color. Maybe I'll make a green drop shadow just for fun. Can you see the green? Yeah. Okay, you can change the angle of the drop shadow. You can change the distance. See, there's my, that's a drop shadow pulling out. Maybe I'll make it a darker green. But then you can't see it, huh? The opacity of the drop shadow, the distance, the size. But maybe I don't want it to look like a shadow. Maybe I want it to look like a glow. So it's a glowing disc. So I can change the color to something bright, like a bright yellow, white, gold thing. And then I can adjust the opacity, I can adjust the angle, I can adjust the distance, I can adjust the size a lot bigger, and the spread will disperse it to make it look glowy. Maybe I'll bring the size in a little bit. So now it's really glowing, right? So that's how you turn a shadow into a glow. And if you wanted to add a backdrop, then you can check background on and see now I have a background color backdrop here. And again, you have all these options to choose from, the the gradients, the bevels. You can bring down the opacity, you can change the color. So now I have like a red background that's transparent. But if I don't want background, I just want everything transparent, then I uncheck background and then I'm good to go. And then I can make this, after I spent all that time in Legacy Title Properties making all those changes, then maybe I want to make that into a style so I can store that. So let's see, if I go to my Legacy Title Styles, I can choose New Style, and I'll call it Nabby's Disc, and I'll say OK. So now I have it as a style down here. If I wanted to try out a different style, one of the styles that were created already by someone else, I kind of like this Arial black gold. I can click on that, and then I have given it a different style. Or look, there's red. So like if you're doing titles or graphics, you can just apply different styles here. But then if I go back to mine, now I have mine again. I like mine, so I'll keep mine. But then it put all of my decisions that I made in Title Legacy Properties into a button.
You went to save it. Did you go to file or?
To save my style, I went to Legacy Title Styles, and I clicked the little options, and then I chose new style, and then I gave it a name. It has a name in there, but I named it Nabby's Disc. So that's what now it's stored as a style. There are other styles you can use. You can use the other styles as a starting point, and then you can go in and make changes to fit your particular needs. Like here, there's a, let's see, oh, the type of stroke here is depth. Maybe I didn't like that. I can uncheck it. See, I can just make changes in the title properties to the style. But I'm going to go back to my style, and I'll just go ahead and use that. It's interesting enough. Also, if something's off center and you want to center it, there are these center buttons here.
So how do you go back
Go back to where?
to the your start? In the
You
using
should
that-
be able, if you saved your style.
Oh, I didn't see.
Uh-oh, if you didn't save it, then try undo Command Z a bunch of times. Okay, and then also you create titles. If you create a title, you take the type tool, you can click and type something. I'm just gonna type. So type, and then you can scale it up. Now that's got my style on it, but if I want to see what that looks like with some other style, I can click around, choose different styles till I find one I like. And then I can scale it by mousing over bounding box corner, holding shift to constrain proportions. You can also change the size of the font by dragging here. And you can change things like the kerning or the, well, leading is if you have multiple lines. But okay, if I wanted to select more than one object here, then I have my align options here. So I could do center align, for example, so they line up to each other, or I could do right align, or like if I want them to line up, their bottoms line up or their tops line up. So you can use those align buttons as well. If you don't like something, you can just select it, press delete. And I just want this to be in the center of my screen, so I'm going to just use the center buttons here. And then when you're done, you just close the window. You don't even have to, you can, if you save, you can save, but that's saving your entire Premiere folder. Your entire Premiere, that saves your entire Premiere file. There's nothing in here that you can just save your work. When you close it, that will give you your title that you just, or your graphic that you just made. So there it is here. It went into my sequences folder because I accidentally had my sequences folder highlighted when I made the title. If I want it to go out of my sequences folder, I can just drag it to the left. So now it's no longer in my sequences folder. It's just hanging outside in my project panel here. So now to get it to the timeline, I can just drag it. I can double click on it and it opens it up back in Titler. I can close that again. I can just drag it in onto with my, I'm going to use, not my pen tool, I'm going to use my selection tool, and I'm going to drag it onto the video track 2 and line it up with the playhead where I want it, where his hand's open. And then I can do some keyframing on this title. So when you select a title made with the legacy titler, these are your options. You have motion, opacity, time remapping. Now what if I made a title with, or graphic with the with one of these, the type tool or the pen or rectangle or ellipse? Let's see the difference. So if I take the new type tool, the way the new type tool works is you click the new type tool and then you can just click right on the screen and I can type something, type. Okay, so I have type. And then I can use the selection tool, move it around. And then now look at effect controls. We have not only motion, opacity, and time remapping. What do we have? We have new properties here. We have text properties. All the text properties. You can also access your ellipse and your, these are for masking, I guess. But you can change your font here. You could also change your font in the titler. So what you have here to control things, you got font, you've got alignment, you've got, typography controls here. You've got fill, you've got stroke and shadow, transform. And what's cool about this is then you can keyframe things like you could already keyframe this, but you could keyframe more options in your title here. So like rotation, opacity, let's see. So anyway, I'm gonna delete that though. So where does it go here? It doesn't give you an actual title listed in your project panel when you do it like this. But wait a minute. Where did it go? It must be on top of everything. Oh, there it is. But you do have a little clip there it's on top of everything that you can stretch out to last longer. But if I don't want that, I can just select it and press delete because I want to focus on the disk. So let's go back to the disk where we put it here. So disk. Okay, so let's select the disk and then let's keyframe it. So we want, when he opens his hand, the disk to kind of emerge out of his hand and then be thrown forward. All right? So right about when he opens his hand, that's where we want the disk to emerge. So we can use the arrow keys, find where his hand opens, and then what we want to do is we want to keyframe the motion. So we can highlight the disk by selecting motion. That's selecting the disk. And then we can move the disk around. Up motion. We can scale the disk and move it to his hand. Maybe we want it to be starting at 0 scale. 0. So it's just nothing at first. And we can use this timeline here for the clip of the disk to go right to the beginning. And then what we want to do is we want to keyframe scale and position. So we can initialize keyframing by clicking the stopwatch for scale and position. And we have our first keyframes in place. And then we move forward to a certain position in time before we get to the other clip. Somewhere here, and then we can scale the object up to how big it should be when it gets to when it leaves the frame. So you can scale it, like if you want it really big, you can go all the way to 100, or maybe I don't want it that big, I'll just go 42 or whatever. And then if I select motion, then I can see my bounding box controls, and I can actually pull this so it goes off screen. So what it's creating here is a motion path. See all those little dots? The little dots represent all the in-between frames that are between the keyframes. So there's a transitioning happening from point A to point B. This is the first keyframe. When I mouse over it, you can see a little keyframe icon next to my tool. And this is the last keyframe. So now if I drag my playhead back in time, I can either go here, then I can see, look, he's just thrown the disc right out of his hand. So
Dogs tonight.
That's nice.
so it's kind of funny there. And you can change the speed of the disc. by adjusting, you could do variable velocity then and see how that works. But yeah, so it's kind of funny.
I got a question.
Uh-huh.
Okay, on when you started off at point A and you went to point B,
Mm-hmm.
you went in a straight line. If you
Yes.
arc it, will it follow that arc trail?
Yeah, so there are a few ways to arc it. One is to put to move the position in between, but that's not as efficient. Like I could just, if I have my, let me zoom into this little timeline here. So if I position, so this is point A, this is point B. Now if I have my playhead in between, just look at position property, and then I grab this guy and move him, that's going to add a new keyframe, and so then it's moving along a curve there, like that. But
okay.
if I don't want that, let me just delete that middle keyframe and go back to straight. Now, it's more efficient to do a curve with less keyframes. And that has a fancy name that you can remember for Jeopardy called spatial interpolation. There's two types of interpolation. Temporal interpolation, which refers to what? We talked about it last time. What is time? Yeah, time would be changing the velocity from one keyframe to the next, so it's not a constant speed all the way down. That would be temporal interpolation. Now, spatial interpolation you can also do if you can see where the handles are on your keyframes. Like if I select a keyframe, let's see if I can find it. Let me see if I can zoom in here to 100% here, and then find if I can look at my, see there's the keyframe. I can click on that, and then I think this, yeah, right here. It's very hard to see, but there's a little tiny, there's a circle here that's a little bigger than all the rest of the circles, and that is a handle. So if I click on that, I can drag, then I can see the handle. Then I can drag on the handle, and it's going to move the whole motion path. So if I drag on the handle, can you see how it's changing the curve? So that's spatial interpolation. It's actually changing where the keyframe, where the interpolated frames are in space, changing the motion path. Now I have like an S-shaped curve here. So instead of adding a middle keyframe, I didn't have to do that. I could do it more efficiently with just the two keyframes, but change the spatial interpolation. So now it did a little nosedive there. Or I could drag the handle up and make it go up on a curve, and then this handle can come down maybe. And then, what was that?
How can I see these little points, the track?
Oh, the motion path?
Yeah, because I don't have it.
If you select the word position, the property, then you should be able to see them as long as you have more than one keyframe on position and they're in different places.
Yeah.
So my first, good, so now you can see it?
Yeah.
So my first keyframe, or you could just select, let's see, if I click outside in this gray area here, the motion path disappears. If I click on a keyframe, oh, I still don't have the motion path. But if I click on the name of the property, position, then I can see my motion path. So that's a good question. So that's spatial interpolation. Well, you want to see what happens if you add a little temporal interpolation? Want to try it? Let's open up our position property, and then you can see the velocity. Right now my velocity is it constant or varying?
Constant.
Constant. You can see that because this is a flat plateau with the velocity of a constant velocity of this value right here per second, 627.9 per second. That's my velocity there. Yours is probably different. And then if you want to make a change on velocity, you can do a few different things. You can either grab this little handle here on your velocity graph and click and drag down. Now it's going to slope the velocity down, and look what it does to the keyframe. It changes into an hourglass. So now that should change the velocity, so as it's approaching the last keyframe, it should be slowing
It
down,
stops
right?
here. Stops tonight.
Slowing down, right? Or I could have it speed up. If I drag this little handle straight up, then it should speed up. Did it? Or maybe, well, it takes a dip down here though, so let me see if I go this way. So there's variable speed anyway now, but you can also do different things to your keyframe. If you select a keyframe, right click it, so I'm on my position and keyframe, and now you have your two options here. Remember, temporal interpolation referring to time, or spatial interpolation referring to changing the shape of the motion path, right? So you could choose some options there for either of these. Temporal interpolation, if I want to go back to linear, I can check on temporal interpolation back to linear on that keyframe. Now it's back to being a normal diamond shape. If I want to change that to something else, like maybe at the beginning, usually we choose ease out for a beginning. Like you can try and ease out, and then, well, let me make them both linear first. Let's see. If I make them both linear, right click, temporal interpolation, linear. Now it's flat again. And now the end, let's say the beginning, I do ease. Actually, I think I was doing it wrong, yeah. So the beginning you want to do ease out usually. And the end you want to do ease in. So that makes an automatic speed change. Did you see that, how it got really fast in the middle because all the velocity is up here at the top in the middle, and then it slowed down? But then if you want to alter it manually, you can drag on the little end of the handle, like I can make it go in a slope, so it's gradually speeding up. So it should be looking faster there. And if I want to still see it in the next frame, I can just drag this keyframe out longer, so it's going to still be going in the next frame. And if I want it to get bigger here, I can then go to my scale and then make it even bigger. So by the time it gets to our hero, it got much bigger. Oops, I was a little off my keyframe, so I made an extra keyframe I don't need. So I can select one and press delete and just move that keyframe over so they match there. Oh, but then, maybe I don't want it to be that big now. So let's see if I go in the middle here, if I can I make it smaller here? Let's see if it will hold that size. And then, but then it's not leaving the frame, so I can have it leave the frame by the time we get to, let me get my playhead on. If I want to adjust the keyframe, like this end keyframe on position, I can use my arrows to jump to a keyframe and then simply adjust the numbers or drag the object to change it. So now it's going out of frame by this point. All right. Oh, he missed.
I cannot move my disc. I think right now everything's down.
Okay, I'll come around and help now, so that will be the end.